slightly. There we go. Yeah. Right, I'm going to just see whether it's going live on Facebook. There's usually a 30 or 40-second delay. What I haven't quite figured out is how to get Instagram working really well. Just bear me a second. So I've got those all running. Okay. Right. So, well, good evening, everyone. Just, I'm delighted to say we've got Tracy with us this evening, and also John Whitehead. Good friend of mine. We're going to have a good session today as well. I'm just going to quickly check the streams just to see whether it's all starting to go live. So just bear with me just a moment. I have to do a force a refresh on the browser just to make sure it's all happening. Yes, it is on YouTube. Let's have a look at Facebook. Give me a second. Yeah, I can see it's live on Facebook. I'm just going to check LinkedIn now to make sure that it's working as well, which it is. Good. So technology is working for us. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. It's myself, got Tracy today, who's very kindly moderating the chat, and also we can introduce Tracy in a minute. Also, John is a good friend of mine and a business colleague, and we'll be introducing John a little bit later on in today's session. What I'm going to do is just quickly go through a few key pointers, first of all, to set the scene. So today's session is really about current trends in the property market and how this impacts you. And we've already introduced ourselves, I guess, but I founded something called the Wealth Growth Club about 3 years ago. Actually, it was just at the start of the pandemic when we started doing these live streams. So we had a slight pause for about 9 months and restarted them recently. Tracy, you're more of a sort of personal coach, is that right? Do you want to just give a 15-20 second intro to yourself, if that's all right?
Personal coach, mainly dealing with menopausal women and the issues that crop up during menopause, and focusing more and more with the financial issues that can come about with menopause. Yeah, as in losing jobs, separation, that sort of thing.
Wow. Okay, that must be a really big undertaking. And John, we'll come to you in detail in just a moment, but you started to become heavily involved with EXP. Was about 2 years ago in total.
Yeah, 2 years in September.
Yeah, great, excellent. So we'll come back on that in just a moment, so if that's okay. Very quick introduction here. I personally moved down to this area only about 2 months ago, actually, although I knew Tunbridge Wells pretty well. This area very much joined community life, so living in a little village called Horsemondon. What I hadn't realised is this little village where nothing appears to go on suddenly seems to come to life at certain times of the year. And there was a very big event only 10 days ago, which took place in the village and very well attended. So in terms of what I'm personally known for, I suppose a very strong mission, vision, and belief. Do love helping other people, love focusing on building communities, and also, probably like many of us, love supporting family values. I also love coaching and mentoring people, and love running these live streams. More recently, I've returned back to my roots. I used to be in a estate agency for 5 years, and that was quite a long time ago. I actually decided to leave agency when it started to go very corporate. I just didn't really want to be part of the corporate machine. But the whole world has done a full circle since then, so we'll no doubt be talking about that. And I love building partnerships and very much believe in the principles of personalized marketing. And John will talk about this quite a bit today as well, but I very much mirror what John's going to be sharing with you as far as some of the top tips are concerned. So we'll come on to that a bit later. Really, the whole theme of the Wealth Growth Club is based around the 4 pillars. So it's not basically, at the end of the day, if people can acquire their own home, that does help set people really well up in the future. And of course, if you decide to get a bit more seriously involved in property, that can create rental income. And that ties in really well with Robert Kiyosaki's principles around the cash flow quadrant, about creating recurring revenue streams, which give you a lot of long-term strength. And if you can build a business around that as well, which is focused on generating profits and capital appreciation, that's really good. So property is a really good one for that. Gold and silver is a really good hedge against inflation. We know what's happening with the pound and the dollar is through continual inflation and devaluation. But gold and silver overall, although on a day-to-day basis it might be volatile, in real terms it's the ultimate store of value along with property. And obviously it's about creating intellectual property as well. If you can create other areas of creating a recurring revenue, then that's absolutely great. And this, John, what I'd really like to discuss with you for a moment, this is coming to you personally, and then we'll sort of move on a little bit more onto what you are really in business, if that's okay. But could you just share for a minute, let's just move this slide for a moment, if I can do that. Could you just share for a minute a little bit about you personally? When I was looking on your LinkedIn profile a few days ago, I noticed you've been in agency for, it's about 15 years, isn't it? Is it pretty well?
17 years. Yeah.
Years. Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into that and your journey? Would you be okay to share that with us?
Yeah, of course. So I remember sort of like even at school when we were doing careers guidance and we had to do psychometric testing, and estate agency was one of the jobs that actually came up for me. So I always find that quite ironic that I actually did end up down that path. But I've always been interested in property ever since I was a kid. I was in the forces for a number of years, and then when I came out, thought about what I wanted to do. I went travelling, and sales was a core area that I really wanted to invest some time into. I was fortunate enough to, when I was working in London, to secure a job at the time with Foxtons. Foxtons were a very hot estate agency to kind of work for at that time. Everybody wanted to be involved with them, not just because they had flashy Mini Coopers, but they just had a very strong reputation for being good agents. And it was a good training ground. I spent about 18 months with them, and it was pretty fierce, and it's probably the most competitive environment that I've ever worked in. And they had a huge market in London. They absolutely dominated. So I kind of cut my teeth there, really. And a lot of people didn't even make it through the first month at Foxton. So I was quite chuffed to make it for that amount of time, because it was quite high burnout, and you had to put the hours in there. And it was very hugely target driven, like most estate agency businesses in corporate. From there, I actually did some time in recruitment, which was probably one of the best things I ever did, because I think it helped me to kind of harness my style, in a much more consultative approach. And it really taught me the core elements of sales, and then I went, back to property because I missed it. I missed that kind of face-to-face interaction. And then since then, I've never looked back, really. I've stayed with it. I moved out of London. I've got a young family. It was a no-brainer to kind of move this way. It's a lovely part of the world in Tunbridge Wells and the surrounding areas. When I started my estate agency career, I actually started out in lettings, and I took a job with Countrywide, when I moved out to this area. Countrywide at the time were one of the leading, I'd say, corporate estate agencies in the country. At one point, I think they were valued at like £1 billion or something like that. And it was quite a tragic story in terms of their downfall, because they owned a huge amount of estate agents, brands such as Hamptons. Now they're involved with Connells, King and Chasemore, Freeman Foreman, Ashton Birkinshaw. I think they had in total sort of like over 50 brands across the country, maybe even more than that, so they were a massive outfit. I decided that lettings wasn't for me in the long term.
John, just kicking in for a second on that, if that's all right. You mentioned did you say, did I hear you properly? Did you say they were turning over almost £1 billion, or did I mishear?
At one point, they were the Rolls Royce of estate agency. They were. They were the biggest of the biggest. Yeah, they were huge, and then they lost their footfall and they lost their way, and it's been a bit of a slippery slope, since then.
What was the key trigger for that?
Picked them up for 100 million, put it that way.
Sorry?
I think Connell's picked them up for something in the region of 100 million.
Wow. And it presumably it wasn't just one event. It must have been a series of events that led to those challenges or problems. What would you say its biggest challenges were at the time?
Well, its biggest downfall was when Purple Bricks came along, and we had the rise of online estate agency, and there was a huge concern at that time that was going to basically wipe out high street agents,
Right.
because it was a cheap model. So what Countrywide did was hedge their bets and started putting a huge amount of money into an online platform, and they changed their chief CEO to a lady called Alison Platt. And Alison Platt had never worked in a state agency before. She came across, I think, from Bupa, and it was very much a service orientated business, or supposed to be. But it flopped, and it flopped dramatically, and it was a long way back after that. And the problem was, the biggest issue that Countrywide made was that they made a huge misjudgment, and because they thought it was just going to go to the online model, and that would do the job, and it'd be cheaper fees, they basically took out all of the middle management. Yeah. And I mean, like, massive redundancies. And the problem with that is that they took all the senior money makers out of the business and basically gave them to the rest of the high street. And a lot of these ladies and gents all went off as well and set up on their own, so and it was those middle managers that were, the people that inspired and really drove those teams, within individual offices. So yeah, whilst Countrywide had some successful independent offices within regions, there was also a huge amount of them that were making no money. Yeah.
Wow. And was that the key reason? Because you moved on from Countrywide, didn't you? But was that the key reason you moved on, or did you stay on for a while then?
No, look, I mean, I stayed with Countrywide, and I stayed all the way up to area manager level, and I've not got bad things to say about Countrywide. I thought the training was good. I thought the way they treated the staff was good. For me, I just think estate agencies at a new place, and I think it needs a shake up, and I think it's stuck in the old ages at the moment, and it needs to move forward from where it was. And I think, the online model that came in with Purple Bricks, kind of tried, and it failed. And it failed because people want service, and people want their hand to be held throughout that process. And our, estate agency business, it has its ups and downs, in terms of the conveyancing process, marketing, that whole thing from start to finish. And, there is a small percentage of people that can do online, but there's a huge amount of people and personalities that aren't comfortable dealing with those kind of things, and I think, there was also a huge flaw to the Purple Bricks model, because the cash was being taken up front, so there was no further motivation for the house to be sold. So I think agents have made a comeback, in terms of, and I think what we're starting to see now with EXP and Keller Williams and all the other self-employed models is the evolution of what Purple Bricks was,
right?
But more to, I think there's, I think it's moved forward in a much better way, because now it's a process of being able to deal with one person from start to finish, and I think that's
it's about personal
great. Yeah.
Yes, it's really interesting, but I think actually this whole thing about Purple Bricks is quite an interesting model, isn't it? Because they themselves almost disappeared, from what I understand. They sort of ran out of money, didn't they? And it's really interesting. They got a new CEO now, aren't they? Trying to introduce.
They're trying, but I mean, you've got to remember, at that time, it wasn't just Purple Bricks that came in at that time. So lots of other companies jumped on the bandwagon. So you had Sarah Beanie's company, Tepelo, Hatched. There was a few like little independent ones that sort of like tried to go it, that way. Like Hatched was Connell's online sort of like business, and they all went under. Purple Bricks is literally still for me scrabbling to kind of stay there and try to change things up. But when you work in a estate agency and you've dealt with purple bricks before, like for me personally, it's not a good experience because when you're having to phone into a call center for half an hour just to speak to somebody and they don't know anything about that transaction, that it puts it on a very weak footing. So yeah, there's flaws to the model, for me.
Yeah. It's interesting because I had a fairly recent experience of purple bricks, but more as a pure customer or potential buyer because we just moved proper house. Obviously, we registered with multiple agents, including Fox and Sons, which I have to say that they are very much on the ball. I was quite impressed by them. But pearl bricks I found by far the most difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
Really, really difficult. The people I dealt with were very inefficient. I might have just been very unlucky.
Yeah.
But they've come up with this freemium model now, and which obviously everything. There's no such thing really as free because ultimately they have to make money somewhere.
It's a honey trap.
Make it money through extras, don't they?
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, I think this whole, and we'll talk about this a bit more in a minute, but obviously around personal service, I think is really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
I don't understand how you can have personal service when you've got one person covering such a broad area. That's not personal service, because even if you've got one agent in an area, you're still learning new things all the time about certain roads and certain properties. So I just, I think that's, a bit of a flaw. I don't want to purple bash sort of like purple bricks too much, but I feel I've got quite a strong opinion about how that model works. Yeah.
Indeed. Again, we'll talk about the model that you so very much follow around EXP in just a minute again. But in terms of from that, so did you go straight from Countrywide into EXP, or was there a little bit of a journey in between?
I had a bit of a gap because I was doing some property development myself, and then I did a couple of projects, within that. But I just, I missed the estate agency. I knew, it's something I wanted to come back to. And, I'd seen an ex couple of colleagues, like for me, it was like, well, where do I go here? Because I'm, as an area manager, I had a good job. I was on a good salary. Where do I want to go? And, I did some consultancy work for a smaller independent in Tunbridge Wells. And I know every agent, in this town and how they work and, and the type of people that work for them. And I just couldn't see myself in any of those places. And I had my, when you run an office or a sales office, it takes a phenomenal amount of energy to get it off the ground and to really get momentum going. Certainly if an estate agency loses its reputation locally, it's a one-way ticket down. So to turn things around can be quite difficult. And when I'd already done that multiple times for Countrywide, I turned around failing offices. That's why I got taken up into an area manager's role and was asked to look after other offices. So I just felt a bit kind of, you could say, burnt out of it or exhausted with it, but I was also becoming a bit disillusioned with where it had gone, and targets, and and it wasn't, for me, it wasn't about the customer experience anymore. So when I came across this model with EXP, I'd seen a couple of other colleagues had done it, and when I went to kind of meet with the the chap that I met to discuss it, it all sounded a bit too good to be true, because I'd almost started my own estate agency sort of 8 or 9 years prior. That was with a franchise group, and the costs involved with that were absolutely, astronomical. You were talking about an 18 grand sign-on franchise fee.
Wow.
And that's before you've even started. And I just thought, this model is a low-cost startup. I think it is the future because it is a much more personalized service. I think, there's a lot more strength within online media these days. And yeah, so far so good. 2 years in, it's certainly this year it's absolutely rocketed, and I've been I'm incredibly busy.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Right, thank you for that. John, by the way, in a minute, I forgot to do this beforehand, but could you have your links ready with your socials and your web address, etc., email address? Because I meant to deal with this earlier, I forgot about it. But what we'll do is we'll come back to the topic of today, if it's all right, and focus on those same points. Tracy, if you could think of some questions as well, which you'd love to come up with. What I'll do is I'm going to just show the slides. I'll bring it down to just John and me for a conversation, so you're more behind the scenes. But I'll bring you in a bit later if that's all right. So, right. So let me just share this back again. Right. So really moving on to today. Now, obviously, one of the things that we promised to do was to share some information around the current market, current trends in the market. So we're going to be talking about what's rising in price, what's dropping, what's staying the same. The slides pretty well speak for themselves. What type of properties are hot, what's not, what regions are best places to live in, and what improvements could be made to your home to increase the market value and saleability. And obviously, we'll be touching on the whole area around property investing as well. But just moving on to the first point quickly, because I did a bit of research before this call. And obviously, in a moment, John, I'll come to you. We'll get down into some real detail. But this information from the UK House Price Index from February 2024, and it's not surprising London obviously is at top at being the most expensive, and the northeast is obviously by a long way the cheapest. This is in general terms, but you're talking about properties being almost a third of the cost, typically up in the northeast versus London, and even the southeast is still probably 2.5 times the value of properties in the southeast versus the northeast. So drilling down, sorry about that. Drilling down into a little bit more about Kent in particular. Interesting, I was intrigued by this actually. I thought Tunbridge Wells would be right at the top of this actually, but Sevenoaks, according to the UK House Price Index, certainly in February, was being rated as being one of the most expensive areas to live in Kent, excluding the London boroughs. And then Tunbridge Wells was the second most, which is interesting. I have to get your thoughts on that, John. Would you agree with that as a matter of interest?
Yeah, 100%. I would. Just like with Sevenoaks, the quicker commuter links into London and the prestige of the area. It's been well known for a long time. There's some phenomenal property there as well. Some incredible bespoke homes that have been built historically, and you can understand why there's so many in there. There's half a Fleet Street in there, I think.
You're right. That's interesting, isn't it? So when you look at this, but then look just in Kent, Sevenoaks 460,000, Folkestone 270,000, Gravesend 280, Rochester 290. Ashford's still quite a bit, because much further down the bottom, or despite the fact it's actually on an excellent commuter link. The train straight into St Pancras, because it's also on the Channel Tunnel link as well, isn't it? So, so I thought that was an interesting set of stats. And then now this again is taken from the House Price Index, but also Zoopla and Rightmove, and the general trend across the UK as an average, according to the official figures, was a drop of 0.2%. A very small drop. It's almost not measurable. But it's just interesting. In Kent, overall values have still, it's not been a very sharp increase, but there has been a steady increase in prices over the last 12 months. And I think what would be really nice is to sort of drill down a little bit more on this. Let me just pull this back so we can see John again. Just spare me a second. There we go.
Excuse me.
So there we go. So John, sort of focusing really on the main topics for today. The first, obviously, we've discussed about whether price is rising, dropping, or staying the same. Generally, in the sort of Tunbridge Wells area, the areas that you mainly cover, what's your experience? Would you agree with what those statistics are saying, or have you got a slightly different opinion because it's based on your local knowledge?
Well, I've got a different opinion. I mean, like last year's market, first 6 months of the year were fine because we had sub 4.5% mortgage rates, and there was a huge amount of buyers. You know, when the rate started to crop back up to 6, that still had existing offers from lenders, and we're trying to, you know, we're holding on to those rates because there was so much uncertainty about if rates would come back down. Things with properties, you know, the market never grinds to a halt. People have to move, you know, for a number of different reasons. So, you know, we got through that 6 months, and I actually had a pretty decent first 6 months. It was the back end of the year where it really struggled, and that was because of the, you know, 6% plus mortgage rates. That was enough to kind of kill off the market. So what we saw there was definitely a drop in prices if you were serious about sort of like selling your property. And I think last year got measured at 4% in total, which in the grand scheme of things, actually, you know, it wasn't the 15 to 20% drop that people were kind of jumping from the rooftops, you know, trying to push out in the media, which is what they always do. You know, it was a 4% drop. Prices had climbed to quite high figures, you know, before that kind of drop. So that was, for me, that was just a rebalance out of the market, in terms of where it should have been. I think going into this year, I don't feel prices are dropping any further. You know, I think they've kind of leveled off now, and I do feel there's confidence kind of coming back into the market. So, you know, we've had sort of like mortgage rates, you know, drop, you know, and then, you know, some of the lenders have put some slightly small increases back on those figures. But again, I think they're about to drop again, you know, because now we've gone to 2% rate in inflation. I mean, even today, I saw an article that NatWest are now the first bank to drop rates, and it'll just spark off the competition. Rates will come back down. And I genuinely think, you know, at the moment is a fantastic time to move. There's some great deals in the market. And it's a great time to upsize. And I do think there's been a lot of people that have also noticed that, and that actually to get that jump up now to the next level is achievable.
Right. No, that's very encouraging. So would you say, if you compare it to this time last year, would you say that prices are back to roughly where they were a year ago? Or obviously, when things suddenly went a little bit pear-shaped last year, you very much felt there was a bit of a drop. Would you say it's returned, or would you say it's not quite there?
The market was August 2022, you know, and then you might have got away with it for 2 or 3 months after that on some of the pricing. Thereafter, it needed to be, you know, in my opinion, you probably needed to take 5% off to kind of get a sale achieved. And you know, people weren't buying sort of like doer-uppers, you know, either. That was a kind of different market. But you know, there were motivated sellers last year because there had to be, because a lot of people couldn't afford the increase in the mortgage rate. And then you got to also remember there was a lot of buy-to-let investors who were offloading their properties, because at the time there was a lot of them that were concerned about the change to the EPC legislation, because they were going to push it from an E to a C as a minimum. Now, if you've got a period property, you know, to get it up to a C level is always going to be quite difficult. So there was loads of buy-to-let investors last year that offloaded, and you know, and then that causes a bit of a catastrophe in the lettings market because there's less stock. You know, that's a totally different line we could go down as well. So so I think prices have leveled off. I think we've had a dip of 5%, you know, since the peak of the market in August 2022. I don't think it's gone forward from there. Some areas are better than others. You know, I'm not saying that Tunbridge Wells is bulletproof, but this market here holds up pretty well because it's like a suburb. Yeah. But once you get out into the villages, you know, in and around Tunbridge Wells, they will suffer more, you know, in terms of, because they won't have the levels of footfall for buyers that we have in a more area like Tunbridge or Tunbridge Wells.
Yes, and that, I mean, at the end of the day, Tunbridge Wells, or Tunbridge generally is known areas being very affluent, aren't they? And
same with Sevenoaks. That would have done well. Yeah.
Sorry.
Same with Sevenoaks, and it's the same. Like, you know, when you're looking at properties that are $1 million plus or 1.25, you know, where, you know, the buyers are more cash rich, you know, that market isn't, you know, for me, isn't affected as much, because if you've got a good house on a good road, it sells. Yeah. If you've got a house on a more less prestige average road, yeah, you're probably going to need to drop your price a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is the great thing with you, John. Obviously, you've got the local knowledge as well as the past experience, having been in agency for a long time. I think it's sort of really interesting as well as around this whole thing about what type of properties are hot, what's not. First of all, what type of properties would you say are, really the type of properties to be buying at the moment in terms of absolute medium to long-term investment, not just as a home, but possibly as an appreciating asset as well?
Yeah, look, I guess it depends on what area it's in. If it's a buy-to-let investment, I think some people will look at buy-to-let investment. If you, like, for instance, you can get a better yield if you buy in a poorer area where the property is cheaper, but you can still achieve good rental prices. The thing is with rental prices is you can set whatever figure you want. No surveyor or anybody else is going to come in and say that's too expensive. But if you try and buy a property and it's overvalued and a surveyor comes in from a lender and says that's too much money, I'm not going to lend on it, then that's it, isn't it? Yeah. So,
Exactly.
but you can buy a property, a flat, again on a really good road and hold it, and that will appreciate better than something in a poorer area. So, and I think the thing is, over the last 12 months, there has been some particularly good buys available. And I think, so in property development, they will move in this market to try and, secure as many properties as possible. But then in a seller's market, there's less deals available, So at the peak of the market in August, 2022, or the run up to that, when you're going out to a property and you're bidding against 6 other people, you're not going to get anything on the cheap. So I think, over the last 12 months, there's been some particularly good buys available. Yes, you needed to take a risk and try and forecast where the market was going to go. But if you were getting something at 20 to 25% less than what it was, then that's a huge margin of safety. I picked up one myself in COVID, and I used that logic and I got a phenomenal buy on a 3 bed. But I think there are some good areas where you can go and invest right now. And I do believe if you're savvy enough, there is still some good deals out there. And if you can, get out and get something secured over the next few months, you will sort of like feel there's benefits, because I'm very confident that the market will be kicking on next year. And this window would have passed, which everyone's bit, you wait for a buy. Some people wait for a buyer's market for so long. It's the irony is when the market kicks off and it starts to go into full motion, and then people panic, and then the stampede
You're missing out. Yes.
And then you're up against 3 or 4 people, 5 people. Whereas the market's really slow now. Go and get a deal.
Yes.
Market.
Yeah. It's actually, in many ways, it's a really good time to buy and sell, because
100%.
Because first of all, it's unlikely you're going to get gazumped, and equally you're probably unlikely to get totally screwed on your property being downvalued, unless it's really overpriced to start with in the first place. So a bit of stability in the market actually is not a bad thing. We need these periods of stability. Also, just touching on the
UK.
Sorry?
There's not enough houses in the UK for the population that live here. And there are 95% mortgages out there, and the higher rental figures are, the more determined more people are going to be to get out of rented and to own their own home.
As a matter of interest, what would you say is it should be avoided at all costs? What type of property should be avoided at all costs?
Look, leasehold regulations at the moment are really, really tightening up, and it's making it much more complicated, within that kind of area. And I think Michael Gove, tried to dive in recently and untangle it a little bit and make it a little bit more easier. And, certainly with lease extensions and things like that. And, I think he's I haven't really read the latest update, but, so yeah, leasehold at the moment, leasehold is proving a little bit more challenging. You know, at the same time, you know, there are plenty of good leasehold properties out there. You know, it's just, I think, you know, properties with very high service charges are definitely putting potential purchasers off, and I understand that. I completely understand that, especially when people are a bit more stretched. You know, do they want to be paying out another £300 to £400 a month in service charges? You know, again, that's a different topic of conversation. You know, I come across some blocks that are really well managed, and you know, they're paying in £100 a month. You always, you know, even if you own a house or a flat, you've still got to keep it maintained.
Yes.
So, but yeah, you know, you need to be careful with, you know, that's the biggest downfall. Leasehold properties, you know, who's managing the block, what's their costs, is there a sinking fund, how well does the building look, you know, and a lot of that's the fallout from Grenfell.
Yeah, and actually it's really interesting because from where we used to live, because we moved from Shirley near Croydon to Purley, so we moved there temporarily for a couple of years while we wanted to find another property, and around there's been massive construction projects going on, and tower blocks going up absolutely everywhere, typically with either no parking or very limited parking, and with streets nearby where there's no parking on the streets either.
Yeah.
And I did touch on this last week, so my apologies, Tracy, or anyone else who's listening from last week. But there's one lady in particular which I really felt for, who I happened to meet about 6 months ago, and she bought a really nice apartment on the 7th floor of a tower block, but it was actually on the west in the area of West Croydon.
Yeah.
No parking, good commuter links, admittedly, because you've got the trams there and you've also got station. But it was also near the part of Croydon where there'd been all the riots, you know, only a few years ago. And basically, if you looked at the moment, the service charges aren't too bad. But in reality, that poor woman, when she tries to move, which almost certainly she will within sort of 4 or 5 years' time, invariably she's going to find she's got a white elephant, because the property will probably not have gone up much in value. The service charges will have gone dramatically increased, and she'll be competing against other sellers who are also wanting to move. So I think it's interesting. Thank God we're more in this area. You know, this sort of Tunbridge Wells, Tunbridge, Martin, Northmondon area, because around here there's a lot of very good, high quality stock around.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, we're very spoiled. There's some phenomenal property in this area.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. Well, I think we sort of touched quite a bit already in which regions are best places to live in. We particularly talked about Sevenoaks and Tunbridge Wells. Are there any villages or towns around here that you particularly feel are really quite?
I've got a huge soft spot for Hastings.
Hastings.
Yeah, and St Leonard's on Sea. I think there's, again, some really amazing architecture in terms of the buildings. You know, the Decimus Burton, which is the same as Tunbridge Wells. St Leonard's on Sea, you know, I know they're calling Shoreditch on Sea now. I think it's got a great vibe down there. And, you know, yeah, some really beautiful houses. And, you know, if I was going to be investing, that would be an area that I'd be quite keen to pick.
Wow.
And it's quite it's a very, very reasonably priced area to buy in still.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's got the old town. For me, it's got all the attributes of, you know, the next kind of buzz area, you know. And I even when I went down to Brighton recently, I hate to say it, but I preferred Hastings.
Really? Do you know, I haven't been to Hastings for 35 years, given my age now. Went down last Sunday, ironically enough.
Yeah.
And we had a really nice time. And then, of course, I hadn't realised there's a really old part of Hastings, which has got so much character in it as well. So it's interesting you particularly picked that town.
And the other one's, like, you know, you've got to look at the other area that's kind of doing really well from what I understand at the moment is Folkestone, you know. So, again, some great property, lots of really nice, attractive period property. You know, all the docks have all had a massive rejuvenation, and, you know, some lovely housing stock there, and great beaches. So
Folkestone.
yeah,
Do you know, I always have this perception with Folkestone that because of the the challenge that we face with immigration at the moment, that it had got a lot of inherent problems around there. Is that not the case?
Not from what I understand. It's gone very arty as well.
That's
So
it.
yeah, it has.
Wow.
And again, it's got the nice part of the old town there, which is nice. So I was really impressed. I just spent a few days down there recently.
Yeah.
So they're quite kind of buzz. Chatham's obviously gone through a period of development because it was just so reasonable to kind of buy there. And then I know lots of people started to push out towards Norwich, and places like that because it was a lot more reasonable. So yeah, it just depends. I remember when Hull and all those kind of northern cities, everyone was kind of dashing up there to buy a 3-bed terraced house for 50 grand. But I don't know. I personally stick to the southeast. I'm also starting to see, I've had quite a few clients actually move to Scotland as well recently.
Right. Very
And
extreme.
from what I understand, across the border in Scotland, it's really stiff competition to pick something up.
Mhm.
Even when we were in the downturn. And again, I know sort of like Wales as well has been through a bit of a period of growth because a lot of people were going down there and picking up super cheap properties. So
Mm.
and it's again, but there's some lovely places in Wales that are great kind of places to live. But I think in lockdown, COVID, there was a huge push towards Cornwall in the southwest. So everywhere seems to have its little time.
Yes.
I think as long as it's got all the right ingredients, nice property, good vibes, places to go, good commuter links, all those kind of things, then eventually everything kind of pushes out a little bit further.
Yes. And I think that's been accelerated really as well, isn't it? Because the advances we see in technology, especially in
But you don't need 2 days a week in the office. If you're in Hastings, it's an hour in. You don't mind doing it, and most people work on the train anyway. So you get loads done. So it's a no-brainer.
No, exactly. Well, hopefully you're enjoying some gin and tonic there as well, though I suspect it's probably not just a glass of water, but
Maybe later.
Yeah, maybe later. I suppose the next thing really is to understand what you feel are the best improvements that people can make to their home to increase the marketability and saleability of the property. Any tips there you particularly feel worth sharing?
Yeah, look, this is an easy one, really easy. So look, when you value a property, okay, you'll always look at comparable properties, but the other key thing that you look at is square footage. Yeah. So any additional square footage that you can add to a property will yield additional increases in the value of the property. So, and one of the cheapest ways to do that, which a lot of people have been doing, is garage conversions. Okay. So not many people are using garages anymore. If you can increase, if your house is primed for something like that and you can turn it into a home office, turn it into a usable space, that's a quick, easy tick in the box. Obviously, loft conversions, extensions, always sort of like do the trick. Kitchens and bathrooms, they say, will always sell houses. So yeah, they're the easy sort of like quick ones that I can point to, which I know definitely will improve the value of your property.
Yes. That's interesting as well, because I know we spoke a few days ago and you very kindly introduced me to someone who I hope to get on the show in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That's to do with property staging.
Yeah.
But I mean, sometimes you must go in properties which are very, very run down.
Yeah.
But you can also equally go in properties which are very run down and perhaps just not very clean or actually quite dirty as well.
Yeah. Look, asbestos ceilings, but Artex ceilings, it doesn't cost a huge amount to get a plasterer in and to skim a ceiling. But the little finish it has on it is great. And it's like today I went out to like a 60s ex-council house. But it's the small things, like they changed the internal panel dooring, so it doesn't look like that old council kind of, cheap dooring that was in there. And, they changed all the flooring up and they just modernized it. Same with conservatories at the moment. With those old conservatories, you can now have them heat proof, so you can use them all year round. So they'll basically fill the ceiling and turn it into a proper usable space. Again, that's square footage. So if it's a usable space, then it becomes more valuable. So staging helps. I mean, look, the better your house looks, of course it kind of helps it sell. Little house plants, neutrally decorated, those are all the kind of key things.
So you're not suggesting people go as far as baking loaves of bread before?
No. But Magnolia has had its day as well. And I think we're finally starting to get past some grey, because we've seen grey has been
right.
hot for the last 5 to 10 years.
That's true. I suppose I don't need to give you a chance to get a glass of water or something. But I know, Tracy, you may have got a couple of questions. And obviously, if anyone's got any questions online, by the way, if you're on YouTube, Facebook, or any other platforms, do feel free to ask questions. We will try and answer those while we've got John on air. But Tracy, I'm going to sort of bring you in for a minute, actually, if that's all right. Let's bring you in. But also at the same time, I think we touched about property investing a little bit earlier on in the conversation, didn't we?
Yeah.
But you've also given some good indications to what type of properties are actually quite good to invest in. Is there anything else you want to add to that as well?
Look, it just depends what you're going for in terms of property investment. And that's the thing. You've got to draw the line between, is it something that you want good capital appreciation on, or is it something that you want to rent out and get a better yield?
Yes.
That's entirely up to you. If it's going to be for rental purposes, and you're looking for a longer tenancy, buy a house. Dead simple. Flats are good. Sometimes you'll get some oversized flats where you can create the second bedroom. That's where you'll be able to add value, into some property. That's always a quick sort of like easy fix. Same again, I saw recently a semi-detached house, which actually was originally a 2-bed semi, but they turned it into a 3. If you add an extra bedroom into any property, you will add, as a rule of thumb, an extra 10% in value.
Wow, that's a good tip. That's lovely. Tracy, you've probably got a couple of questions you'd like to throw at John, have you?
Yeah, because I'm in a totally different area. I'm in Wales, and
Yes.
I'm just over the Brecon. I'm in the Brecon Beacons National Park, or Ban Ibercaia, as we're meant to call it these days.
Yeah.
Properties here, because if it is something that I'm going to in this area, as opposed to in the valleys, they tend to come onto the market and stay on the market for quite a while.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's not so many people in this area.
Yeah.
So if I was to be looking to get into property in this area, rather than going because down the valleys you can pick up terraced houses and they can be done up pretty quickly and cheaply. In this sort of area, it's a big tourist area as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of if I was to look at investing, what type of things would you recommend that I tried to look for?
Well, obviously Airbnb's kind of changed the game, hasn't it? So if you're in a tourist area, within most areas of the country, there are property development groups called it's called the PIN network. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
And there'll be one near you. There'll be a local PIN property development group in your area. And I've been to quite a few of them myself in the Kent area. And I got loads of hot tips in there. There's lots of people that are doing Airbnbs or room rentals, or, perhaps some people are buying properties and, doing things called mini-mos these days, which is basically a mini version of a HMO. So you can do, as long as it's only not in excess of, I think, 3 people, you can rent out a room by room. If you're renting out room by room, you'll get more money. But ultimately, you've got to kind of do the research and just see if that's an area of interest to you in that area and what people are achieving.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to say this is a word of caution to you, because I've had, a few clients that have tried the Airbnb route, and it is sometimes like a semi full-time job kind of managing it, you know, and you know, I've seen people walk away from it as well, you know, because they haven't been able to kind of get those funds because competition's got quite strong for it as well.
Yeah, and especially around here.
You know, more and more people have kind of jumped on the bandwagon. And it's the same with like HMOs, you know, again, there was once upon a time, no one would touch a HMO, you know, it was dirty. It's a dirty word, you know. Then all of a sudden they got all trendy within the property development networks. And then everyone was jumping on the bandwagon. And then in the end, I think there's been an oversaturation of them. And that's the thing. I think these days, like, you know, within all these groups, a lot of people kind of jump in and think it's easy, or from a wealth creation point of view, you know, it's not. It's really not. And like, I've seen lots of people get their fingers burnt in property because they haven't done the research. And if I'm honest, they don't know what they're doing, you know. And even for me, and I've worked in the industry for a long time, you know, it's only because I've got this knowledge that I know what to stay away from and what to kind of go near. So all I'd recommend is go and do your research, go to some of these local property pins for development, have a look kind of what the buzz thing is in that area, what's working, what's not working. And then, you know, use your own guidance. And then you've also got to kind of evaluate how much time you want to put into it. Or is it better just to buy something for a long-term tenancy? And there is a shortage of rental properties at the moment. Yeah, massive shortage of it. And is it worth just buying something cheaper, renovating it, and just taking a long-term view? And if you can get 5 to 6% yield, that's pretty good.
That's some very good tips there. Yeah, actually, just on this point, that's a little bit of a slightly risky question because, of course, you know, we've got the elections coming up, and assuming that it's a given that the Labour government will get in, I think there's been some talk about some further tightening up in the rental market, hasn't there? Do you see any of those challenges causing any problems for people coming in as in property as investments in this space?
There's such a like the thing is with the whole buy-to-let market, because I remember, you know, the time when they hadn't put the restriction and the extra stamp duty tax on buy-to-let. And I remember all the first time buyers were getting outpriced by the buy-to-let investors, and you know, people were kind of up in arms at it. And at the time, even as an agent, you know, a lot of agents were kind of leaning towards selling towards the buy-to-let investor because, you know, the first-time buyers, you know, first-time buyers can get kind of jumpy over some properties if they weren't in particularly great nick. So with a buy-to-let investor, you had some sort of a little bit older. And I remember at the time, like every other call used to be from a buy-to-let investor. These days, it's such a minority of people looking at investments.
Interesting.
It's swung the other way, you know, and I think the rental, because you can't offset your mortgage costs anymore, they've taken a lot of the nice kind of perks out of it. Now, that's why we've just got this time bomb that's going to absolutely go kapow. It already has to an extent, which is why we're seeing incredibly high rents. And at some point, the government will have to do something about it because they've caused it, you know, and they're either going to have to scrap the additional stamp duty, or they're going to have to step in somewhere. But you know, the landlords have taken such a bashing over such a sort of like long period of time now. Tons of them have vacated. So if you're smart and you've got the money and you've got the deposit, you know, and if you can even get hold of a 2 or a 3 bed house, long-term tenancies, that would be my advice.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Yes, it's interesting the points you're making there because, in fact, Tracy, you might know who I'm referring to here actually. But there's someone I know who'd got 15 properties throughout the UK. He's based in Scotland, but most of his portfolio is in England.
Yeah.
And he decided about a year ago to start offloading his entire portfolio.
Yeah.
I don't know all the reasons behind it. I'd actually ask a bit more about it.
EPC legislation.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think it is to do with that, but also I think that went for really small-time investors become quite hostile, isn't it? Because you used to be able to offset mortgage interest.
That's it.
As a business cost. And that advantage, which I think should rightfully be there, because at the end of the day, it is a legitimate business if you've got a buy-to-let. Our wonderful
mortgage rates.
Sorry.
Plus, so once the buy-to-let mortgage rates increased as well, then that margin's even squeezed again.
Yes, exactly.
So that's when we're making a loss.
So it is about also making sure you do your numbers as opposed to start.
You've got to really do your figures. Exactly. Yeah, really do your figures.
No, exactly.
Well, if you can buy, if you like I say, to pick up a property in Northern England, then there's still some really, really good buys, but there's some good yields out there. So that can vary area to area, and that's where it's worth doing your research. And even there's lots of Facebook groups set up now in property investment. It'd be amazing. You'll pick up some great nuggets in there.
Yes,
go and have a look. And it's the last place that you think you'd find some great information, but honestly, there's some great information on Facebook from people who are out there doing it at the moment. But I'm mixed about the whole Airbnb thing. I think it can work. It works area to area, and I just think it's getting in a very competitive ground now to work in.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Tracy, has answered your question?
Yeah, because we are in quite a weird area where I am, because we have got a lot of the tourist influence, but we've got a lot of festivals. So you've got they come in for just that short period of time, but we've also got a new rural college that has got offers older students.
Yeah.
So and there's no accommodation for them as well. So it's quite an interesting area to look for properties, but because we're rural, there's not that many.
No, that's really good. No, thank you, Tracy. It's a really good question. Actually, it tied in brilliantly with number 5. We didn't even
Tracy, room lets or a long-term let if you're going to look in your area personally.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Well, we're actually almost at the end of today's program. John, by the way, you've been an absolutely brilliant guest today. So thank you very much for your contribution. Yeah. What I would just coming onto the EXP part just for a moment, and actually, as obviously John, you very kindly introduced me to the whole concept with EXP, which I really bought into also through another person we both know very well called Jack Terry, who my wife started stalking about a year ago. For me, the attraction for the model was this whole thing about being your personal estate agent again, which I think is a really strong part of the proposition. And also, it's really interesting because you were talking about Countrywide earlier on as part of today's conversation. And I think the model's changed pretty well forever now, because we've got, I think, organisations like Rightmove, Zoopla, and On the Market, etc. To a large extent, how often do people go into an estate agency branch anymore? No, in real terms, it isn't personal service where it is all at. Aren't you really, are we both really in the right place at the right time to make a real difference and to focus on personal service?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I ran my offices, you'd be lucky if you got 1 or 2 people walking in on Saturday, so, and even then, this would be, they might be just in the area for the day or something like that, and, popped in for just a little bit of advice, but times have changed, people are too busy, these days as well, with their own life, and people just want convenience. And we've got a personal service that's emerged in not just this industry, but in lots of other industries. And I think people kind of appreciate it, and I think people buy people as well. And I think I'm a big believer that people kind of want to deal with people that they get on with or trust or know that person's knowledgeable within that field, and are going to be treated in the right way, with respect as well. So it's been an easy transition for me. I've always believed in service, and I'd probably say about a good 80 to 90% of my business comes from recommendations. So I know it's been well received since I started the business. And this isn't being I'm not bragging, but I just don't lose clients. They know that I've done everything possible for them as a client.
I have to say that it's really interesting because the way that you use video walkthroughs and drone footage as well, it's a very skillful. It's a very nice way of sharing information about property, but it's also incredibly skillful as well. I think authenticity, people buy into a lot, don't they, as well? And something that comes across with yourself is when the way you invite people to view, their home, and you give people a physical tour through it, and you make people feel part of the conversation. I think it's really, really smart. So
look, I always say to my clients, if you go into a shop, whether it's M&S or another shop, and you approach somebody and they don't know what they're talking about, or they give you bad service, or they're rude, or or they just can't help you, you don't buy from that person. It's that simple. It's that simple, So and I was very fortunate because I was brought up, around my own mother's business. I saw the way she gave service to people and communicated with people and listened to people. And unfortunately, when I got into sales, that was the basics. That was what you were taught at the very, very start. And unfortunately, that has gone. And it's not just, in estate agency. I see it in retail day to day. Customer service has gone down the pot. And we're just talking basics, basic sales training to people that are coming into the industry. And they just get it all wrong. It's like, how can I help you? Have you seen anything that you like? And it's about building rapport with people and making people feel comfortable. And it's such a shame now. It really is such a shame that those core things are missed. And that's down to the big corporates. They've got that wrong. And, it's something that's not been pushed home, with people kind of coming into those kind of areas. But I notice it so much more now in basic retail. People don't want to do the niceties with people.
No, at the end of the day, we are all human beings who we love interacting with people we know, like, respect and trust. So
and you'll buy something in that shop if people reach out to you. That's the whole point. You're a salesperson.
Yes.
You are supposed to help that company make profit.
And you're supposed to use two ears and one mouth as well. Or possibly 4 ears and one mouth. You're supposed to listen and make sure you meet someone's needs at the end of the day.
Know your stuff, be passionate about it, and and earn your crust.
Exactly. No, thank you. Right, we're pretty well right at the very end. Just got another 30 seconds or so to go. But obviously, a very big thank you to Tracy and to John for taking part today. John, could you have your links ready and can you post them in the comments parts?
So I've just pulled my Instagram up, which is Tunbridge_Wells_estate agent.
Yes.
You can find me on Facebook. Just put me.
If you've got the links handy in your notepad, if you could just copy and paste those in, John, that'd be great, because it'll be straight on all 4 channels simultaneously, which would be great. Obviously, you're very welcome to find me here. And what I'll do, this is an EXP website, which I personally got, but also I run the Wealth Growth Club, hence what we're running today. Those are my personal links. John, you may also want to read out and also give your mobile number if you're happy to do that, as well, so people can reach you. So the bottom line is, if you want to explore a little bit more about either buying or selling a property in these sort of general areas, then drop me or John a message, probably by text or WhatsApp initially. And then, one of us will be delighted to come back to you. So the bottom line is, any sort of closing comments that you would like to make, John, before we call it a wrap?
Like I say, I've put all my contact information there. I'm always happy to help people. So if you've got a property related query, please feel free to reach out. And thanks very much, Tracy, and you, Rupert. It's been a good
thank you. Actually, we can't see your comments here unless it's me.
I think they're in the private chat.
Can you just copy it across in the?
I see if I can copy them across.
Actually, sorry, my fault, John. I should have explained it to you. Let me see where I can do this now, if I can. See who can do it first. Right.
copy in one go. I don't know.
Yeah, I've got it. There we go.
Yeah, beat me.
So it's going out all across all the socials right now. Sorry, it's got mixed in a little bit with, it's all got a bit blended together. Yeah, actually, we better not post again. Otherwise, it's going to go out everywhere twice. But thank you very much, John, for your contribution. Tracy as well for helping today. Some great questions came out. And hopefully, those of you who've joined in today by one of the social channels, you enjoyed it, do reach out to me personally on that number there. John, you've put your mobile number in there, have you?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, that's wonderful. All right, we'll see you all next week. Thank you very much for joining in.
All right, see you later. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.